Hello and welcome to Nashville Forward, a community affairs presentation by Cumulus Media. My name is Matt Murphy, and I'm the host of Nashville Forward. The purpose of Nashville Forward is to bring forward business leaders in our community to talk about what they're doing to advance the city of Nashville, the state of Tennessee, and by extension, the United States of America. And there's so many of them in the city of Nashville and in the state of Tennessee. And we've got a very special guest with us today. His name is Joe Benvenuto. And he is COO of LIFTbuild. Joe, welcome in.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm excited for those who are not familiar with LIFTbuild to introduce them to this brand, what I think is a brand new concept in terms of building large structures in major cities like Nashville. Is that a fair way to say what you guys do?
Absolutely.
So I want to start here, Joe. I just want to talk a little bit about, the old saying goes, if you want to tell a story, start at the beginning. And I guess the story starts with Barton Malow, the parent company of LIFTbuild. Just give us a little sense of Barton Malow and its history, how long it's been around, and what exactly the company does.
Sure. So Barton Malow is a 101-year-old general contractor this year. We have offices all throughout the U.S., and we really build our foundation is built on really innovation and transformation. We like to say we build people, projects, and communities. All three of those. It's not just projects. It's not just construction projects. It takes people to build those projects, and of course, we want to impact our communities in a positive fashion. That's with buildings, and that's with some of our charity work as well that we do through our foundation. So Barton Malow is 101 years old this year, and LIFTbuild is a wholly owned subsidiary of Barton Malow, and there's some history there as well. LIFTbuild was born in 2017, really out of the need or the desire for us to transform the way we build buildings and the way we are impacting communities in a positive fashion. And then, that 2017 acquisition of what was a single patent and a couple key resources really has built its way into what we see LIFTbuild today.
I can't. You mentioned, the parent company Barton Malow being around for 101 years. I can imagine. Obviously, we haven't been around that long. You haven't been around that long, right, Joe. But I can only imagine that. I mean, what Barton Malow does has been changing constantly, right? I mean, for 101 years, building techniques and the way things are built. But what happened with LIFTbuild, and I know we'll dive into it a little more deeply here in just a minute, but this is a big leap. I mean, is that the way you would describe it? Just a kind of a big leap forward in the way that big buildings are constructed?
Absolutely. The construction industry is probably the largest industry to lag in innovation. And so this is quite disruptive. This is a big bet on innovation, really geared towards safety and productivity. How do we make our trades, men and women, first and foremost, safer, and how do we make them more efficient? Ultimately, providing more value to our owners and clients.
I realized as you were saying that there was an assumption in the premise of my question. I mean, has building large buildings changed that much over let's say 100 years of Barton Malow? I mean, has it really changed in the way that you look at design and construction of buildings?
I would say there's been incremental improvements, just as we see in other industries. There's always incremental improvements in the way we do things. But if you were to look out the window today in Nashville, you'll see all kinds of construction going on, and it doesn't look a whole lot different than it did 50 or 100 years ago. We would like to say we're safer, and there's different technologies to lean on today than there was back then. But LIFTbuild is really an opportunity to affect all of the people in the supply chain, all of the people in this kind of where they fall within this network of stakeholders, and impact that on a broad basis, not just incremental improvement, but an opportunity for everybody to gain from this innovation, from safety and efficiencies.
So just kind of finishing the circle on Barton Malow, they have been around for 100 years, started in Detroit, in the Detroit area, branched out nationwide, and even prior to LIFTbuild, and its formulation in 2017, I guess. Barton Malow was in Nashville, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So our first project in Tennessee was in the 90s. In 2015, we started to do some work for Vanderbilt and others, and really began to build our presence here in Nashville, opened an office in 2015, and has really built a really diverse market for us. We have kind of automotive on the outlying areas of Nashville, and then within Nashville, of course, that relationship with Vanderbilt has continued to grow and really substantiated an office here that we have maybe 35 or 36 people in now. And construction industry is vibrant here, and we're really excited to be here.
I guess for those wondering, well, what would I notice in the city? Outside of Vanderbilt, obviously the Vanderbilt campus, you probably have many structures there that you've been a part of, but First Horizon Park would be, the Sound Stadium would be the biggest probably.
Yeah. And that's really what brought the mainstay here for us in 2015 was that project, and has kind of just started the momentum and why we're still here today.
So I'm excited. This is so exciting to me. When I never know, and part of one of the reasons I love doing Nashville Forward is I get to meet new people, exciting people that are experts in their field. And innovators in their field, and so, but you never know what you're diving into. And I thought, wow, we're talking about building construction. What's exciting about that? And then I did, a little bit of a deeper dive into what LIFTbuild is, and this is fascinating to me. The idea of reinventing the way that you build these types of structures. And I think in order to understand that, you have to what type of buildings are we talking about when it comes to LIFTbuild? Let's kind of start there and go from there.
Sure. First, I'm pretty honored for you to say that. Nashville has a lot of famous and significant people. So if you think that I'm a special person sitting in Nashville,
you're the man.
I'm pretty honored. No, so LIFTbuild is really focused on high-rise construction. We like to say between 12 and 40 stories. We have done concepts for buildings upwards of 60 and 70, but it's really geared towards that high-rise construction. And we are attempting, being from Detroit, as you just mentioned, we're attempting to turn that construction site into more of a manufacturing environment, something we would see in an assembly line for automotive manufacturing. Why can't we reproduce that on site? Why can't we make that construction site more efficient and more organized and most importantly, safer for the workers that are involved? And then focus that, what we like to call now vertical manufacturing, that vertical manufacturing approach towards high-rise construction. High-rise construction because we have the quantity and the repetitious natures of floor over floor. A 20, 30-story building has a lot of opportunity to try and create this production line and leverage that floor over floor as we build the building.
So for our viewers and our listeners of the podcast, and I'm flying blind here, Joe, so you'll help me. But typically you think of a big building that goes up in our city, and if you live in and around Nashville, you see these buildings going up all the time. They go up from the ground up, right? You typically see some sort of shaft that goes up first in concrete, and that's typically your elevators. At least that's my perception of it. And then you slowly but surely watch that building built from the ground up. LIFTbuild's like literally the opposite. Is that a good way to put it?
Absolutely. We like to say the better way to do it, but yeah.
Tell people what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that was a great introduction. So that shaft that you referred to, that is typically housing elevators or stairs. We like to call them spines. So we're trying to transform the industry. Sometimes we'll transform really the glossary of the words that we use as well. So those shafts, we call them spines.
Okay.
Our buildings can have 1, 2, 3, 6 spines, depending on the configuration of the building. And we'll construct those spines then full height of the building. So picture that same 200 feet tall building that you see being constructed. We'll erect those spines full height of that building, 200 feet in the air.
Mm-hmm.
They'll stand on their own. Once they're fully constructed, or as they're being constructed, we'll start to put permanent stairs, start to work on permanent infrastructure for vertical MEP, so fire risers and mechanical shafts and things like that will go into those spines. But then we'll use those spines as well for our primary lifting support of the rest of the floors. And so how LIFTbuild works, once those spines are erected full height, we'll begin to kind of assemble each floor at grade. We will establish a factory floor, what we refer to as a factory floor, a concrete working surface for our tradesmen and women. Rather than being in the mud and the dirt and the stone, we'll put them on a concrete surface like they would be in a factory. And we'll assemble that floor plate at grade. So we will either place concrete, erect steel. We as well lift that floor plate up slightly above the workers' heads, and all of the underdeck mechanicals will be put on. So if this ceiling wasn't here and we could see into that structure, you would see fireproofing, fire protection, plumbing.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That would typically be done, in that process that you explain on a conventional building. We'd like to do that at grade before that floor plate goes up. So as much as the horizontal distribution.
When you say grade, that's at ground level.
Yeah, so trades are, they're walking on the surface of this factory floor, or they're on a short step ladder. They're not in man lifts. They're not on scaffolds. They're doing this work within arm's reach. Again, this assembly line type process, rather than some of these, working conditions that we'll put workers in that, first and foremost, are sometimes unsafe, but then also less efficient.
Well, and I want to pause there because I want to make sure people understand that if you're working 20 stories up, 10 stories up, you could probably put a lot fewer people working on any individual project in those situations and environments because you got to try to keep them safe, right? Yep. So it occurs to me that efficiency and safety would be magnified if you're on the ground.
100%. 100%. And that I started my career as a tradesman, and so I was a carpenter, and so this doing things to make the work environment safer is obviously near and dear to my heart. So above anything else, efficiency, whatever it might be, safety has to be better. We have to send people home in a better fashion than they came to work in that morning, and we just have to make that type of progress in our industry. So doing that assembly at grade rather than in a high-rise building, we have workers that are pouring concrete or connecting steel at 300 feet in the air, and there's of course these tradesmen and women are trained and they know how to keep themselves safe, and we do whatever we can to keep them safe. But it's safety mitigation where we feel strongly, let's just start working on safety by design rather than trying to mitigate accidents. Why don't we just remove the hazard? So in that assembly line process that I was referring to, we'll also put the facade on that floor plate at grade, which immediately eliminates the fall hazards that we would typically see. So that floor plate will be erected at grade. The facade will be put on. We'll start to store all of the materials on that floor plate in preparation for the lift, and then that fit out will be done once that floor plate is lifted in the air.
And I know at some point our viewers on the podcast will be able to see some of what you're talking about, and we'll give them a website that they can go to a little bit later on so that they can see what you're talking about. It's hard to, at least for someone who just got exposed to this over the last couple of days, it's hard to describe to you. When he says facade, he means the exterior of the building as the building is going to be presented in its final and completed form, and it goes up, and you literally are doing the top floor first.
Yep, starting with the roof, absolutely. Even the roof will get done at grade, so all of the membrane, the rooftop equipment, as much of that work as we possibly can do. Let's do it at grade when it's within arm's reach. All right,
I want to pause that construction process thought line for just a moment and go and take a step back and ask you who thought of this, Joe? I mean, look, I'm not a creative guy when it comes to this type of thing, and I've been in the same room with structural engineers and civil engineers and these types of guys, but it would occur to me that, in whatever boardroom where this first got brought up, that guy was probably kicked out of the meeting, right? It's like, what are you talking about? Get out of here. You've been drinking? I mean, because you're kind of flipping the script a little bit.
Yeah. So, let's rewind back the history of this type of approach of building things. There has been examples of this even dating back to the 70s. But in 2017, when we were exposed to the concept of doing this type of thing, it took a lot of work for us to reimagine or re-engineer the concept into what it is today. And so in 2017, we formed a small group of people kind of in the pursuit of trying to get this to a place where it could be used in the marketplace. That takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of resources, engineering, and vision, quite honestly. And our president, Ryan Maybach, that from the parent company, is a very, very innovative, futuristic, and visionary type person. And so when he's seen this, he said, "Hey, I think that's something." Rewinding back, that our 90th anniversary, we set this goal of doubling our efficiency by the time we were 100 years old. And that's a big, lofty goal. How do you do that? How do you measure it? Will you ever reach that type of goal? And can we answer all of those questions today? Maybe, maybe not. But what it did is really fueled this desire to try and meet that goal. And so LIFTbuild is a really significant example of that. So for our first kind of 3 years of existence, we were in R&D phase trying to make this thing come to a fruition. Just because it is such a significant change, and trying to just kind of reimagine how we would see this fitting in the marketplace.
And so with that, 3 years of research and development, I would assume, dangerous to do, but that involves just questions. And getting answers to questions. Every possible contingency, every possible scenario, every possible challenge that's going to come up in kind of flipping the way that you're building these things. You want to try to answer those things way before any concrete gets poured or any men get on a job site.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or women get on job site.
Yeah, absolutely. And sitting in the kind of in the heart of a 100-year-old construction company at the time. 100-year-old construction companies sometimes, I'd like to say that we're not one of them, but aren't always the most innovative. Innovation doesn't always come out of.
Right. No, this is the way we do things.
Right.
We don't do it that way.
We've been doing it for 95 years, right? Why would we change that? And so it's not always easy, but we have a lot of great support from our leadership, which is totally a necessity in something like this. So then we get to the point where we think we've done a really good job, and it's time to put it to use. And around 2019, that process started for our first proof of concept there in Detroit called the Exchange, which you have seen and had mentioned in our conversations prior to the podcast here. And that was our first proof of concept. That was our prototype. Back to the whole manufacturing terminology and environment, where after the engineering is done, you have to prototype and test and before you kind of commercialize what you're creating. And so that was our first proof of concept that broke ground in 2020. And the building finished in 2022, 23, and that that was a test of what we did, which worked out really well. Is why we're sitting here today now, commercializing this concept.
So when you and I want to get back to the construction and how all of that, the inner workings of that go, but you talk about the prototype and in that conversation that we had briefly before the podcast, you mentioned that, if you're trying to come up with a new way to design an automobile, developing models and prototypes of that conceptualized automobile is, relatively speaking, I know probably automobile manufacturers watching would go, it's not inexpensive, but relatively speaking, it's inexpensive. When you're talking about buildings, these are a lot, millions and millions of. I think the Exchange was a $60-something million project. So it's not like hey, let's put this up and it's a big investment, not only within the company but in the community as well.
It absolutely is, and I use this. I like to use the phones that we carry around as an example all the time. That's a good example of technology that just gets better as each month goes by, quite honestly. And we're at iPhone, whatever it is, 16 now for a reason, because we continually improve that. And you can iterate over and over again at a relatively small cost. But, you're exactly right. We're talking about $100 million buildings here. And so the kind of the iterative process is challenging and difficult, and quite honestly, probably the primary reason that we're lagging in innovation in an industry. That incremental innovation can be pretty easy. Can we find a better way to connect steel? Can we find a better way to install plumbing? Sure, but can we find a better way to completely build the entire building? It's not easy, and that's the challenge kind of we're faced with and taking head on.
So so back to this construction idea. So you have spines. It can be, and I think for the Exchange it was 2.
Correct.
But you can have whatever number that you need to accomplish the building that you're trying to accomplish, and then you say at grade or ground level, you're constructing each floor sort of independently, and then literally, as the name would imply, you're lifting it up after it's constructed.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So once that floor plate is completed, as much as we can get it to for level of completion, we'll lift that up into place with strand jack technology. Strand jacks have been used since 1940s. They're used in industrial applications, and so we use that technology to lift the floor plates in place. Travels about 35 feet an hour. I always tell a really funny story. When we had the first lift on Exchange, there were people on the sidewalks, waiting for this thing to happen. It had been in the news, and while we were erecting these spines, people were trying to figure out what the heck was going on downtown, and there were people waiting with their phones out, with trying to take video of this floor plate going up. And I kind of walked outside the fence to talk to one of them and asked him what he was doing and got him in a conversation. And he was ready, video rolling, ready for this thing to go up into place. Right. And at this point, it's a 200-foot lift traveling at 30 feet an hour. I just kind of said, I think your phone's going to run out of battery before you see it go all the way up there. But, that typical floor plate on Exchange weighed just over 1 million pounds. So we're lifting 1 million pounds. We like to say 35 feet an hour is fast enough for us when you're lifting 1 million pounds into place.
Each floor plate is 1 million pounds.
You got it. Absolutely. Between the structure, the facade, and then the materials that are loaded onto them. The other thing unique about our buildings, and you've probably seen it in the pictures, you don't see tower cranes around our buildings. Mm-hmm. See them all over the city here. Hey, that's a great great sign
symbol
of growth.
Of progress. Sure.
It's a symbol of growth, and that's a great thing. And we love to see that as a tradesman. I love to see cranes, right? But we don't have tower cranes on our projects deliberately because we're just using those smaller support cranes at grade to erect that floor plate, and then when we lift it into place, we're lifting it through those strand jack system that's again supported by those spines. And the other thing that's unique about our buildings, that those floor plates are fully cantilevered from those spines. So when you walk in, you've walked into high-rise buildings before, and you might see a beautiful view, and there's a column kind of in the way. Our buildings don't have any interior or exterior columns. That floor plate is designed to fully cantilever from those spines. So not only is it advantageous from a construction perspective, but when you're designing the building and you're an owner accepting this building and beginning to design your interior floor space, you're not constrained by column grids and other things. So it makes a very, very nice open floor plate to be used for that interior use.
I mean, it occurs to me that would be very attractive for residential property like condominiums and whatnot, particularly on the upper floors when you're not, if you want a view of the city, whatever city you might be in, Nashville or whatever it might be, that's a pretty big selling point.
It is, absolutely. And reuse. We had talked earlier about just the people that are attempting to kind of provide adaptive reuse of office space that's now vacant, and working around a column grid in an existing building can be challenging. But just think 30 years down the road when we have these buildings up all over the place that wanted to be adapted for a different use, it's one less thing that you're working around as well. So there's a lot of advantages that from a design perspective that we can also.
So I imagine you guys learned as you were building the Exchange, you kind of learned a lot about, the reality. I mean, it's one thing to do this in the conceptual space. It's another thing to do it in the actual space. But it seemed to me that the footprint of the build was a lot smaller than you are going to typically see. Now, I understand that, in the middle of Nashville, Tennessee, that the footprint is what the footprint is, and and that can probably prevent certain designs. It causes challenges in terms of length of time for the build, but it felt to me like y'all had a pretty limited space and were able to go up pretty quickly.
That's correct. So typically what you would see here as well, we're building lot line to lot line in a dense urban environment. So there's really no room for kind of progressing around the building and the site or material laydown. And that can be a good thing for us as well. We like to leverage these lean principles of construction and just-in-time deliveries. And so when that building is designed with a constrained site and that floor plate goes up, conventional building, you start from the ground and then build your way up. And as soon as you put that first floor up, you've now kind of constrained yourself for access. But every time we lift a floor plate, that site's wide open again. So we can move materials, we can move equipment and people, and it kind of, you start over every time that floor plate goes up. Just for reference on exchange, that cycle time, each floor plate took us at best about 8 days. You had mentioned the learning curve, so we didn't start off that way, but by the time we got halfway through the building, we were really kind of had refined our process and got down to 8 working days from the time we started that floor plate until it was lifted and locked into place was only 8 working days.
That's incredible.
And we had planned for 10, and throughout that process, back to the kind of this we really leverage continuous improvement as much as we can. Let's learn from the way the building is going up floor over floor. And so we hired a lean consultant that would normally monitor a manufacturing environment. And we had them watch every move that was made on that factory floor, which is an interesting concept because if you're one of the trades people working on that factory floor, you're thinking, what are those people doing?
Right.
But it was interesting because those trades began to embrace that. And what they were doing is just collecting data on how are we delivering materials? How is the work getting done? How are we planning the work? And we would go through an after-action review for every single floor plate, and then we would divulge this data in which those trades supervisors would then go and make improvements on the next one and make improvements on the next one. And so we went from a duration that may have been 14 working days when we started, and by the time we finished the building, we were all the way down to 8.
Wow.
So just that opportunity for improvement is significant.
And I mentioned before that we'll have some visuals of the exchange itself. I could only imagine what some of the reaction was about. When I saw the shot, and I think you might have this on the website, the shot of the first 2 floors up, and the spines are still there, and it looks like it's like, okay, what's going on here? What is this? This looks very odd. So I imagine partially through construction, people were kind of scratching their heads, going, "What in the world is happening?"
One of my favorite things to do, I always say, if you can't have fun at work, then how can you make it through your life and a career? And I like to kind of walk outside the fence sometimes and just listen to what people are explaining is going on. They're building 2 buildings here. They're doing this, and then once it's up and people start to try and explain what they think it is, it's pretty interesting. But pictures don't do any justice when you walk underneath a building that's hanging in the air at 200 feet. It's really even from my perspective. I've been in the industry for almost 30 years now. 26 of that has been with Barton Malow, and it just it never gets old, and it's just really interesting to see something so different than I've seen in my career, anyways.
How many stories in the exchange?
Exchange was 16 stories.
16 stories, and the shot, folks. I hope we can get it. It's I guess at 2 floor plates, maybe 4 floor plates, and then it's like 2 little legs. Because they look so small comparatively speaking to the overall size of the building. And then obviously, as you fill that in, the scope of the project kind of, you can visualize it a little bit better. But I could just imagine some of those conversations going on in the city streets while it was happening.
Absolutely. And drones swarming around while we're in the middle of it, from being flown by who knows, but just the interest and what it has done for, we talked about the revitalization of Detroit here before we got started. And this is just a good example of that. And Detroit's in our backyard, of course, but what a great story, the birthplace of innovation in automotive, and as well, we like to say the birthplace of innovation in construction, and trying to, our tagline is transforming the way the world is built, and we like to say that's kind of serial number one in Detroit. And the city was so accepting and so supportive to get this concept to become a reality in their city. And
I think if I'm not mistaken, the first high-rise building in maybe a couple of decades in the city. Is that fair?
That's correct. Almost 30 years actually. It is specifically in the Greektown part of Detroit. And,
right.
And we're so excited to try and bring something so vibrant into a city like Nashville and just keep this going. We met with the city of Nashville. Just part of innovation can also be education to some of the stakeholders, and that might be lenders, that might be insurance carriers, but the city municipality is a big one for us. You can just imagine being in the planning or building department and getting a set of documents that shows
they're going to do what now?
Yeah. You can't just submit permit and hope for the best. So we start years in advance that education process and sitting down with the local municipalities and within the city and just start to build trust and start to educate them. And you're just great people here in Nashville, so supportive and so interested. And when they say things like, hey, you let us know whatever we can do to help you out, that's just a great feeling. And I think just sets the stage for a lot of success in a town like Nashville.
And I want to talk about the relationship between LIFTbuild and Nashville in just a second, but it occurs to me that the benefits for the partnerships that you develop for who you're building for are pretty obvious, but I don't want to skip over them. Cost, efficiency. Just talk about if you were sitting down with someone that is interested. Hey, this is a neat concept. Okay, you've shown me how structurally, it's not going to tump over or whatever. Why should I do it this way as opposed to the traditional methods? What do you say to them?
Yeah, if it's an owner, we have to provide value to them. That value comes through either cost savings or schedule savings, or we like to present both. We have goals of 30% savings in schedule and 20% in cost. And when I say those numbers, it can seem, on a $100 million building, that's
a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And a lot of people will say, well, where does that come from? I had talked about that lean consultant that we had used that collected a ton of productivity data, and we can extrapolate that data out from what we had seen on exchange, that we could, in years ahead when we're on project 3 and 4, we can deliver that type of result once we get through the education and learning curve process. And that's what we're here to do is really build buildings a lot safer, but make them more economical and make them faster for the owner. But it's not convenient to have sidewalks closed and sometimes roads closed, and construction is a great thing, but it can be pretty disruptive to a community, and we try and make that as least disruptive as we can through our methods, but then let's make it a shorter construction duration and get people in that building enjoying it, and let the continue to improve that community the best we can.
So is that, at this point, as we sit here, spring of 2025, is the biggest challenge getting those in your industry over the fear of something new? I would think, you mentioned, the construction industry, this is the way we do things. We don't do things this way. And you present this new and innovative way. And, I don't want to assume things, but I imagine you get a lot of head scratching. I was like, is that the biggest challenge for LIFTbuild right now?
It absolutely is. It's this, what I refer to as adoption headwind. Those headwinds will continue to face that, we think, through maybe project 5 and beyond. We like to say we're poised for that and ready to deal with it, but it is tough, and that's the most significant thing that we have to beat is building trust in partners, building trust with the community, and building trust with owners that this is a better way, and it's not a risk as you might perceive it to be.
Well, you mentioned your history with Barton Mallow. How did you start with the company?
So I started with Barton Mallow as a union carpenter, a concrete carpenter apprentice in 98 or 99, and what brought me into the construction industry is I always just love to see things getting built, and that that feeling of walking away at the end of the day, being able to see what tangible results from your hard work at the end of the day, even today, really fuels me. So had came into the company and as a carpenter apprentice and had worked really hard to kind of get into supervisory roles in the trades. And then, there's one thing I'll say, well, there's a lot of really great things I'll say about our parent company, Bart Mello, but one of them is providing opportunity to people. And
for growth.
And I'm a great example of that. Provided opportunity to then kind of come out of the field and get into more project management type role and eventually leading into executive roles within the parent company. And then this opportunity for LIFTbuild, kind of a funny story. I had just kind of asked a question when we had initially made the acquisition in 2017 to our president and said, hey, what is this LIFTbuild thing? And coming from a person that started their career in the trades, I said, you're going to do what?
Were you one of those skeptics, maybe? Right.
Say that again.
The COO
I have
like,
to.
Whoa, I think we should do it this way.
But immediately had gotten very interested, and it got to the point where he just said, why are you asking? And I just thought it was really, really interesting, and joined the LIFTbuild team about a year later, and started to kind of develop this concept. So again, the opportunity that was presented, and you take advantage of that, and the culture that we build within our organization really just is something that we can really leverage growth and begin to to grow innovations such as this.
Well, I bring it up only because just in reading a little bit about the company and reading a little bit about you, it occurred to me that yours is an incredible success story in and of itself. That your level of growth through the company, and obviously that speaks to your drive and your tenacity and your desires, but it also speaks to the company as well.
Absolutely.
And I have found over my years that if a company is taking that sort of approach interior to the company, they're going to take that sort of approach with the communities that they serve, with the leadership of government, with the business partners that they engage with. I mean, if you're doing that inside the company, you're doing that exterior to the company as well.
You bet. I started the conversation about building people, projects, and communities, and I said we're deliberate about that. I'm an example of that. The work we do in the communities with local charities, and we have to be, we have to kind of walk the talk, so to speak, when we say things like that. And the organization is definitely steadfast in meeting those objectives and what we think is important, our core values.
What do you think of Nashville?
Maybe 12, 13 years ago, first time visiting, and thought, man, this is a great city. It was kind of casual trip and just a whole bunch of fun. But then maybe 8 or 10 years later, we start to show up here for business, and I'm even more invigorated by Nashville. Like the growth that we see here, the people, back to the whole people, the people that I interact with, such as the city and yourself and other partners down here, is just it kind of sets the environment for exactly what we want to do. It's one thing to bring innovation to a city, but then bring innovation to a city like this with the people that are excited for it and excited to work together is even better.
Well, I mean, the growth is, I imagine maybe you could point to a few other larger cities around the country that you would see the type of growth that you're seeing. But, in Nashville, the level of growth, I would think that would lead to some great partnerships between LIFTbuild and the city, LIFTbuild and the business community. How have you been received, and what is your approach to? You mentioned talking to city leadership. I mean, what's your approach when you do that? I mean, you're just kind of, how does that relationship grow? In other words,
it's we're in the construction industry, but at the end of the day, it's a people business, right? You're only successful as the partners that you have on your side, and I think all of those relationships have to start with trust, especially when you're presenting something as unique as this.
Right.
You have to build trust, and all of those relationships start there. And we have to work. We know we have to work really hard. We have to kind of, as I said, walk the talk and do the things that we say we're going to do. And so that example with the city is a good one. We're pursuing work. We have a couple opportunities down here that We hope to come to fruition. We probably could have waited later down the road to do that, but we just think that being proactive about that trust building is definitely the way to start.
My reputation, Ben, in my normal life as a talk show host is to ask the hard questions, and so this might be the more difficult question that I ask you. But what will it take to see a LIFTbuild high-rise on the Nashville city skyline in the next several years? I mean, how do we look 3 or 4 years down the road and see that?
I'd like to say just wait a little bit. That's it. That's all you have
right.
to do.
I mean, but I imagine that's kind of a three-legged stool between you and an ownership group or a business partner and then the city itself?
Yeah, it takes a team. It definitely takes a team. It takes an opportunity and then a team that trust each other. And I think we have most of those pieces put together. And then we need a good market. We need a good economic environment for those things to happen. All growth happens through great economic environments, and I think all of that I think the table is set over the next 12 months for all of that to happen.
Well, I mean, certainly in this city, I mean, the opportunities are abundant, and I look forward to hopefully someone, if they're not aware, investing a little more time and researching what you guys are doing at LIFTbuild. I love talking to innovators. I love talking to people that want to do things a little bit differently, even if they've been done the same way for, however many years. And it feels like that's exactly what you're doing at LIFTbuild.
Absolutely. I think my only regret is not sitting here, 10 years ago,
right
in the middle of a lot of that growth that we've seen in the market.
Are there any, and the answer might be, not right now, Matt. So, but are there any projects that are, I mean, I'm certain that there are things that you can't talk about. Is there anything you can speak to? I mean, the exchange has been, by everything that I've seen, an incredible success. And I have to feel like the industry has taken notice.
In a positive fashion as well. And, the biggest thing I was worried about, outside of just everything that we working, was negative press or negative perception of what we're doing. And we haven't had any of that to date. How does that happen? That happens through a lot of hard work from the team that's behind me. And I owe all of that success to them. But then going forward, coming out of exchange, we have a handful, maybe a half a dozen opportunities that we're managing right now that are all in this pre-development phase across the U.S. and beyond. Let's just say North America up into Canada as well. And which one of those will kind of get into the ground first is the question at this point. We do have a couple opportunities here in Nashville, both residential and hospitality, that we would like to see come to fruition by the end of the year, and I think we're in a good spot to make that happen. So
I love it.
A little bit of hard work and a little bit of luck, I think we'll see that happen on the city skyline very soon.
Absolutely, looking forward to that. Get you down. I mean, not that I think there would be anybody to do that, because the concepts are fascinating. Joe, it's been a fascinating conversation, man.
Matt, thanks so much. I appreciate the conversation as well. Any of these conversations are exciting, but this one's been especially exciting. So thanks for that.
Joe Benvenuto with LIFTbuild, a subsidiary, wholly owned subsidiary of Barton Mallow. We appreciate your time today, and we appreciate your time as well on Nashville Forward. It has been a community affairs program presented by Cumulus Media. I'm your host, Matt Murphy, and we invite you to like, subscribe, tell your friends and neighbors about us, and join us next time on Nashville Forward.